right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Auto Repair Marketing Podcast. Thanks for being with me today. As you see, if you're watching on YouTube, Brian's not here, so it's a solo cast with Kim Walker and my guest, Jeff Salzenstein. Oh, Jeff, I didn't even ask you. Is it Salzenstein or Salzenstein? Say your last name.
Salzenstein.
Salzenstein. Okay, perfect. Thank you for being here. I do want to pause real quick and thank our friends at RepairPal for sponsoring the Auto Repair Marketing Podcast. Please learn more about RepairPal at repairpal.com/shops. So here we are with Jeff. I have to tell y'all, we always talk about eating our own dog food, right? That comes back from the Purina dog food times where they said their dog food was so great they could eat it. And we are big believers in doing what we preach and asking our shop owner friends to do. And so we always recommend that you have a coach. And so we're members of an agency coaching sort of our peer group called Agency Management Institute. And a couple of months ago, Brian and I went to the BABA Summit, Build a Better Agency. So like you guys go off to all of your coaching events and groups to be better shop owners. We're doing the same thing in our world. And I met this guy because he was a speaker at the BABA Summit. And I took a class that he was speaking at and just left with some incredible takeaways and nuggets. And I thought, I really want to have him on the podcast. And so we've been texting and chatting and getting to know each other a little better. But I really love what Jeff has been doing. He talked about unleashing the champion within. And he has this zone of excellence that we're going to talk about, where it's connecting mind, body, soul. And I love how he talked about in our session, the mental chatter, how important sleep is. My favorite takeaway, and I wrote this real big in my notes, was stop saying stupid stuff. And I totally resonated with that because I do it all the time. And I think we have to really take hold of that. It can get scary in there if not. So let's start there, Jeff. And we're going to just kind of unpack who you are and how you got to be this outstanding speaker. And you're a coach as well in a variety of ways, literally coaching, but also, literally coaching like sports related, but also leaders and that sort of thing. So let's just talk about like, where did this stuff come from with you? How did you come to that realization of any of those things that I just threw out there?
It's great. Thank you for giving context why I'm here on this podcast today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I always love doing these interviews. So thank you. I'm going to start with my last name since you started with my last name.
And I said it wrong, which is
That's why I'm going to start with it. I think I have a beautiful last name. It's Salzenstein. And I always joke because I get introduced a lot. And oftentimes, right before I'm introduced, they actually say, how do you pronounce your name? And then when they actually get up to say it, they don't get it right. And it reminds me of a time, many times actually, I played professional tennis, which we're going to get into. And I would play these matches where the match would start and the umpire in the chair would start the match by saying, okay, Salzenstein to serve, gets my name right. By the third game, it's Salzenstein.
Right.
By the end of the first set, it's Salzenberg. By the end of the second set, it's Salzen steak sandwich. And if I'm winning, I'm just not saying anything. But if I'm losing, I'm starting to yell at the umpire, like, can't you get my name right? So I've been used to, I'm 50 years old. I've been used to for 50 years, my name being mispronounced. But it's kind of fun to, just play around with it. And if we were in Germany, it would be Salzenstein.
Yeah, right.
But Salzenstein. So, I like to take people into the middle of the story. And the middle of the story begins for me in 1997. It's a second round US Open night match. And I'm playing world number 2, Michael Chang. And I'm out on this big stadium court. There's 24,000 people in Arthur Ashe Stadium. millions watching on TV. John McEnroe, anyone who doesn't even follow tennis knows who John McEnroe. He's the bad boy of tennis. He's announcing the match. He's like one of my idols. And I was so nervous for that match. I mean, the anxiety before, all the mental chatter, all the wasted energy. And here I am, this elite performer moving up the tennis world rankings, and I've got this opportunity to play Cheng. And I get out on the court, and somehow in the first 4 games of the match, I get it to 2-2 in the first set. But I was playing kind of tight. And all of a sudden, I took a deep breath. For the next 15 minutes, I found a zone, and I absolutely started kicking Michael Cheng's ass. I mean, I was the number 2 player in the world for 15 minutes. That's how well I was playing. It was like I tapped into this zone of excellence in the moment. A lot of you listening to this probably can think of a time in your life where you just felt locked in. You felt like you were in the zone, whether it was personally or professionally with something. And so for the next 15 minutes, I'm kicking this guy's butt. The crowd's starting to go crazy. I'm up 5-4 now, and I'm 1 point away from winning the first set. And I was left-handed. I hit this 120-mile-an-hour serve out wide slice. I'm a lefty. I come in, I hit this backhand volley to the open court. Michael Cheng, one of the fastest players of all time, couldn't even get to it. And I win the first set. And the crowd absolutely erupts. People are pointing at me. I'm this next upstart American kid. Yeah. The TV camera zooms in on me. You saw the video, Kim, that I play in my keynotes. And I got this shit ass grin on my face. Pardon my language, but I got this grin on my face. And I always tell people, that smile right there, that was when the match ended. Yes, I was having the time of my life out there, but the dominant thought in my head in that moment wasn't that I stink or I can't do it. It was, thank God you didn't embarrass yourself tonight. And I always start with that story because we all have our limiting beliefs. We all have our upper limits that hold us back. Sometimes we excel in business, but we sabotage our relationships. Sometimes we have a great relationships, but somehow we don't take care of our personal health. So there's these places in our lives that we get stuck, that we get blocked. And for me, I had this block that I could beat the number 2 player in the world. Did I really deserve to be on that court? So I like to share that story because equal parts extraordinary, being on that stage, the effort, the time, the repetition, the perfection of the strokes and the technique to get to that moment. But then when I was in that moment, I didn't believe that I could do it. That my limiting beliefs were circling in my head and the waves of pressure and anxiety. And so I always like to open up that story because it is our limiting beliefs and thoughts that often hold us back.
Yeah, and hold us back from what we define as success. And I remember the video was fantastic, and that was at that pivotal moment in your career. But at some point, you had a different idea of what success looks like, right? We all have, you can define that. I know my little great nephew asked me a question in the car yesterday on the way to church, and when I answered him that question that he asked, I had to tell him, here's the problem with my answer is that everyone can have a different answer to that question. And so I want you to also tell about, because I'm asking you some stuff relating to our shop owner friends. These are, independently owned automotive repair shop owners who are very often the firefighter. They're putting out all the fires. They are very often not only the service advisor, sometimes they're working on the vehicles in the back. They're doing the parts, they're doing the marketing, the finance, like everything. And I remember for Brian and I, when we had our first shop, we were just running around like crazy. And I remember us thinking, is this how it's going to be forever? Because this is not what we got in this for. And then someone came along and helped carry us and push us and persuade us and help us see a different picture of success. Tell about that moment for you. Like, what was success? Now what is it? And how did you get to that realization of changing the definition?
Gosh, it's a fantastic question. And I mentioned earlier, I turned 50 last year. So I'm probably officially on the second curve, the back 9 of life. I'm in the second or third set of life, I guess.
I'm with you. I turned
Right?
50 last year too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like these times in our lives, we start to look at, how can we have more meaning? How can we have more purpose? For the first part of our lives, many times we're going after achievement and the external, and I'm still very much in achievement mode. It's just natural for me. It's in my DNA. I've been winning tennis tournaments since I was 8 years old. Picked up a racket when I was 4. But we always have defining moments in our lives, and many of us we have at least. I think they say we have at least 3 to 5 defining moments in our lives. And if you really live a very full life and you're kind of creative and you're entrepreneurial, it might even be more than 5. Mm-hmm. But one of the big moments was 3 months after that match with Cheng. I had signed with an agent with IMG. My pro career was about to take off like a rocket ship, and disaster struck for me as a pro athlete. I was playing basketball, came down for a rebound, felt a sharp pain in my knee, in my ankle, I should say. It was misdiagnosed for 8 months. I ended up having ankle surgery. 6 months later, in my first pro tennis match back, rehabbing the ankle, I hurt my knee. I had knee surgery. So by the time I was 24, 25 years old, my body was falling apart. And when you're a pro athlete and your body is falling apart, guess what? You can't play. Mm-hmm. You can't just go to work. And so that was a pivotal moment for me where I don't know if it's when I redefined success, but it was a moment where I said, okay, my body's failing me. I've got these limiting beliefs, and there's probably a spiritual side to it, a soulful side that I need to investigate. And I've always been a curious lad. And so I just started going on this journey into high performance, not knowing that 25 years later, I would be helping leaders, executives, CEOs, founders, people through a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And so I went on this journey around high performance. I put my body back together. I made a lot of errors with mistakes with nutrition and how the body moves. I tried all these different things. I worked with these gurus. I worked with the mindset gurus. I worked with spiritual gurus. I flew all over the world to try to unlock answers that maybe I wasn't given. Wasn't coached on as a junior and as a college player. And so I would say that was a big moment where my life shifted because of injury, because of adversity. And part of what I talk about in the Zone of Excellence is developing that resilience. I'd say another pivotal moment in my life that kind of redefined things is I met a coach, and you heard about the story at the end of my keynote. I met a coach that helped me redefine how I looked at my tennis. I tend to be more on the analytical side. He was artistic. He was fun. He was creative. He liked visualization. And so this quirky coach helped me see my sport and my career in a different way to bring more enjoyment back to my work, even in the struggle at times. And then another defining moment was a few years later when I had a really traumatic event in my family where I had a brother that was struggling with addiction. And I actually saw him lying on the floor, passed out, foam coming out of his mouth. And I was 11 years into my pro tennis career at this point. I had achieved a lot, but I was also tired. I was burned out. I was tired. I had all these tips and tricks, but my heart wasn't into pro tennis anymore. And when I saw my brother lying on the floor, that was kind of the thing. It was like, okay, I got to help my brother. I mean, I can't let him die. Mm-hmm. And so that moment was when I became a coach. And, I would say that was a really powerful moment around redefining success, because I went from one day wondering what I was going to do next with my pro career to the next day, I'm packing up my things in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm driving back to Denver, and I'm calling the 3 tennis coaches I know in town saying, hey, everyone, I'm a coach now. Yeah. And I realized in the first month of coaching, I started coaching junior tennis players and their parents. I realized in the first month that I had more fulfillment and satisfaction and happiness out of helping someone else improve their forehand, their serve, their mindset, than me actually doing it kind of myself, or me competing against Michael Cheng on the big stage. So I kind of went through my life story at about 5 to 7 minutes there, but like these pivotal moments help you redefine success. And I think that's the big takeaway is we want to constantly be examining why we're doing what we're doing, what we really want, who we want to become. Those are some of the big questions I ask when I do workshops and I work with teams and organizations. And, we have these moments that shift the course of our lives. And we want to listen. We want to listen to our heart when we're going through it, and make the choices that feed our soul and our heart so that we're totally aligned with our mission.
Yeah, it's something that Brian and I hear from shop owners all the time. And we kind of felt it at different parts in our career as shop owners. So Brian was a technician first for 17 years. Actually, the shop owner time might have been in there as well, but I know that he was a technician for 17 years, but we also owned shops. And we we approach the way we do business very differently. Like, we're a marketing agency, but we we're not coaches. There are coaches in our field. There's coaches like you. However, because we care, we often end up in conversations where it may feel like we're coaching someone. And very often we meet shop owners who, you said the word, burnt out. They're tired, they're exhausted, and they're at the point where they're, I think, trying to decide about, is this a life-changing moment for me? Is it time for me to figure out how to be unstuck, how to be untired, unburnt out, and keep going? Or do I pivot into doing something else? So what would you say to those shop owners who are listening right now? And I kind of feel like where you're going to go with this, which is why I'm asking you, but like, how do you help someone who is just exhausted? They're just tired of the state of the industry or their shop in particular, or whatever it might be. What would you say to those shop owners that are listening?
Mm, I'm going to pause for a moment. What I'm going to say is, I have a client right now that I'm working with that is in, probably we'd say, like, we'll say interior design, or um, refurbishing homes.
Mm-hmm.
And she's brilliant at it. And she's really struggling. She's burned out. She's
Mm-hmm.
wearing so many hats. Some people have burned her, employees. Um, it's just not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And she's uber successful.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working through it right now. And the number one thing that we're doing, because when you're burned out, you don't have the capacity to kind of see things in a different way. You don't have the capacity to maybe solve problems or kind of see your way out of it. So we were on a call recently, and one of the things, I got real with her, and I said, listen, you may push back of what I'm about to share with you, because I don't know if you're going to believe this, but do you know that you're 100% creating your reality with the way that you think and the way that you're showing up? And a lot of times that's a really tough pill to swallow, to say, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
I got myself into this. This is all me. Like, it's so easy to blame the outside world for why you're burned out, why things, the state of the industry, all the things. And maybe some of it's true. But the hardest lesson often is looking at, like, okay, I created this. I, whatever my habits, my patterns, my choices has gotten me to this moment. It's on me. And so sometimes, if you're willing to look at that, you can take 100% responsibility. It can be a bit freeing too, once you just swallow the
Mm-hmm.
humble pie and say, okay, like, I did this. Now, the good news is that you are capable of shifting out of it as much as you got yourself into it. It may take some time,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing that, one, acknowledging, taking responsibility, this is where you're at. And I've had this happen multiple times in my life, like on the pro tour and with the next business. And, even now I go through challenges with growing my speaking business, like taking responsibility and then really starting to look at how you're showing up. And one of the easiest ways to do it is to look at how you're thinking and your thoughts. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was working with her, I said, do you realize that you use the word try a lot? I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do
Mm-hmm.
that. Well, depends if you believe in the power of the universe, if you
Mm-hmm.
believe in God, if you believe in source, if you bring in whatever your term is, something bigger than yourself that you're co-creating or collaborating with. um, you know, they're listening, or he's listening, or whatever you
Mm-hmm.
believe is listening. So
Yeah.
if you're constantly saying, this sucks, and I can't believe, you know, this person did this and they did that, and the universe is listening,
Yeah.
and it will give you what you are putting out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard because you have to practice speaking into existence what you want to create and feeling it too. You have to
Yeah.
feel appreciation and gratitude when you're burned out and when you're not feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
That's the shift, is like, okay, I'm going to start working on how I speak, how I communicate, how I show up.
Yeah.
I'm going to work on taking care of myself, because then the external world will start to see you're doing this and start to reward you.
Yeah.
Uh, Another thing that I would say around this is, if you're in a place where you're unhappy and it's not where you want to be, there's a couple of two big options. One is you can stay in what you're doing and try to figure out a different way of doing it within what you're doing. So make it more efficient. Sounds like with
Mm-hmm.
you all solved that, where someone came in and helped you
Mm-hmm.
see it a different way and you were able to become more efficient and make it work.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just a sign that this isn't your path. For me, on pro tennis, I've been playing for 11 years. I had broken the top 100 in the world. It took me 7 years after those injuries, but I wasn't happy, and I didn't want to get on planes anymore. And my
Mm-hmm.
heart wasn't in it, and my head kept pushing me forward. And so I always say, and I stole this from somebody else. A lot of the things that I use are what I've learned all over the years. Is the longest journey you'll ever take is the 18 inches from your head to your heart.
Mm.
And so if you're trying to push forward with your head and you're not listening to your heart and you're not listening to your guts, it will give you these wake up calls. It will give you more pain and
Yeah.
suffering. So when you're really struggling in your industry or with your business, it's an opportunity to step back, possibly get some coaching and support. Ask the tough questions. What do I really want? Who do I need to become? Who do I need to change? What do I want my life to look like? If I could
Mm.
create the life that I want, what would it look like? And when I ask these questions to people, a lot of times they don't know the answers. They don't
Yeah,
even,
that's
they're
right.
focusing so much on what's wrong, they're not focusing on what they want to create.
Yeah.
And so we have to spend much more of our time focusing on what we create, what we want to create, instead of what's wrong.
I love that so much, and it is exactly where I thought you were going to go. So it's awesome when I mentor quite a few of our team members, and there's it's funny how there's always a trend. When I'm talking to one, something will come out, and then I'm talking to another, and the same sort of thing arises. And it wasn't very long ago when the trend was I was asking them the question, what's true about this? What's the truth about this situation? And they're sitting there going, well, this, and just talking that out and looking at what's reality. What, and you started out with that, but you also kind of touched on, when you said you have a choice. We all have choices. We can go this way or we can go this way. And one was, I'm not ready. I still want to push through. And I love that you mentioned that, because if I'm remembering this correctly, and I took notes when I was in your session, and it's that, and again, this relates to a lot of our shop owners who are like, I'm too old for this. Like, it's just time for me to do something else. But as a pro athlete, you broke into the top 100 tennis players in the world at the age of 30
For the first time.
for the first time. Like, so many people would have given up one before that, or would have been told by other people, you're too old, like it's time to hang it up. But something in you pushed you along, and then you got to that, you achieved that at the age of 30. Like, what'd you learn from that? Were you taking into your life today from that persistence and not giving up and pushing through and doing that at what, I mean, 30's not old, but you know what I mean, in the athletic world it is.
Well, usually when on the pro tour, when guys and gals, they break the top 100 in the world, they're 23, 25, 20. They're not 30 for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that has since shifted in the last 10 years. A lot of guys have broken through later in their careers, where guys are playing longer, gals are playing longer, they're taking care of themselves. But when I did it 20 years ago, it was kind of the new thing. Um, and it shows that I wasn't a superstar from the beginning. You know, I was very good. I played at Stanford. I won 2 national titles with my team. I was a team captain, did some great things in college. I was a national champion in the juniors growing up in Colorado, but I wasn't Andre Agassi or Pete Sampras or Roger Federer. And so I was more of a journeyman. I was like, if you follow baseball, I was like a triple A baseball player, you know, trying to
Mm-hmm.
break through. But I think what it shows me, and my coach that helped me so much, he used to just kind of shake his head and he calls me Seagull. So my nickname was Seagull after the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which is based on a
Okay.
bird that does not follow the flock. He follows his own course.
Mm-hmm.
He soars to new heights. He dives bombs. Everyone ridicules him. Like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the journey I went on. I went on a journey of discovery. I went on a journey to find myself. I went on a journey to learn about myself, my strengths, my areas for development, and I was willing to kind of go it alone a lot of it. So it was really like, you know, when people go on these pilgrimages to
Mm-hmm.
India and they have, you know, these crises and they shift, and I was kind of doing that on the pro tour in a way. In tennis, you lose every single week unless you win the tournament. And I think I won 5 challenger events in my career. So you lose every week. And here's the interesting thing about tennis. Roger Federer did the Dartmouth graduation commencement speech. And Roger Federer is arguably, he was the greatest player of all time until Novak Djokovic came along. But he said the number one, this is, I already knew this stat, but he brought it to the mainstream. If you're number one in the world, you're the best player in the world, you are winning 54% of all the points you play.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're 20 in the world, you're not even winning half the points you play. So imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of the best pro tennis players in the world, and you're only winning 50% of the points you play every day. That means you're losing 50% of the points. Yeah. A baseball player who hits 300, he's going to the All-Star game. He's only getting on base 3 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
So there's so much failure in tennis every day. Even when I go out and play a practice set, if I play 50 points and I win 25 and lose 25, I'm still losing these 25 micro cuts every day.
Yeah.
And so what tennis teaches you is you have 30 seconds between points. It teaches you to take a breath. It teaches you to breathe. It teaches you to pause. It teaches you to analyze, okay, this guy has a really good forehand. I've got to get it to his backhand. You have to problem solve on a tennis court and instantly. And so I think your brain as a tennis player gets used to bouncing back. It gets used to breathing. It gets used to, managing your emotions under tough situations. And so that's what I'm bringing into the corporate world or the business world is, hey, we can take these principles from sport. We can teach ourselves how to recover better. We can train our minds. We can learn how to emotionally regulate through the breath and feeling more appreciation and gratitude, even for the suffering. Rafa Nadal, he won 14 French Opens. And one of his famous quotes is, I just got in the habit of enjoying suffering. Mm. So when your business owner says, I'm too old for this, it's not the correct statement to be saying if you want to shift out of it. The statement to be saying is, or it could be a question like, what could I be doing better to shift out of this? Yeah. What could I change? What can I shift? What can I learn? Who can I talk to? Instead of it, I'm too old for this, it could be, is this really what I want to do? Or you know what? I'm going to embrace the suck a little bit more. Yeah. I'm going to let's embrace more suffering. That's what's really interesting. The whole paradox is the more we embrace discomfort, uncertainty, and suffering, the better chance we have to move through it. But if we resist it or we put it down or we don't want to have it, that's when it actually grows even more. It's really interesting how it's a very kind of Zen Buddhist principle, but truly,
it's so good.
We have to embrace the pain
and
then be willing to make changes.
Right. It relates across the board, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing is, people would think that the years that I did CrossFit, what I got out of it was strength or this, or, you know what? No, it was embrace the suck. It was push through the hard times. You can do hard things. It was get comfortable being uncomfortable for a couple minutes. And so I think that's super important because a lot of our shop owner friends, and we were that too, you just never know. And I'm saying shop owners because we're talking to shop owners. These are men and women who are out there. Maybe they came to the shop that morning and the kids were crazy getting ready that morning. Maybe they got to the shop and the technician is sick and now they're having to go work in the shop when they had their list of to-dos of what they were going to do today. The service advisor quit, the parts didn't show up. Sometimes a lot of this stuff is happening simultaneously, all in one day. And they just want to throw their hands up or walk out, or, we can easily get angry. I know that you are a big believer, which I love, and in just all the parts of our being connecting and being on the same page, whether it's the breath work, but mind, body, spirit. Are you teaching people? I feel like I read that you are a breath coach, maybe. Like what are you doing to help? I mean, just imagine they're in that moment and they're just like, oh, this day could not get any worse. Give them some practical tips for, like, step out and here's what you can go do to go get it together.
Sure. So when we were in our session, we did 1 to 2 minutes of something called heart
Heart.
focused breathing.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of breathing techniques out there, and the heart focused breathing is connected to an institute called the Heart Math Institute. They've been doing research for over 30 years. Fortune 500 CEOs, Olympic athletes, professional sports teams, the Navy SEALs. They focus on getting into what's called coherence. And coherence is like getting in the zone. You're able to get your heart rhythms in sync. And what happens is when we experience frustration, irritation, anger, sadness, our heart rhythms get out of sync. And what happens is that decreases our energy over time. It increases our stress. We have cortisol and adrenaline that's raging through our body. Stress hormones are being released. And what happens is if we're not able to regulate with our breath or with some other techniques, um, those stress hormones course through the body for up to 8 hours after an initial event. And so if you practice 5 minutes of heart focused breathing, you do this coherence training, 5 minutes a day for about 2 months, you can expect the cortisol and the adrenaline to get out of the body in as little as 5 to 10 minutes.
Mm.
So we go from 8 hours of stress in the body to 5 to 10 minutes. This is physiological shifting that's happening. That's why the breath is so important. And so whether you meditate or you breathe through your belly or you breathe through your heart, that's not as important as the fact that you're just working on your breathing. You're slowing your breath down. You're getting into your body instead of out of your head.
Yeah.
And so a simple practice of breathing 5 minutes a day, whether it's box breathing or coherence training, like I mentioned, can do wonders for your health, for your physical, mental, and emotional health. The studies show that anxiety, depression, and anger can decrease by up to 67% just by breathing 5 minutes a day. And yet, most of us don't take the time to breathe 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And so that's why meditation for 15, 20 minutes is so powerful. That's why this breath work for 5 minutes. So I'm certified through the Heart Math Institute in this particular style of breathing. I've got my own twists on it, but this is more of a breath to get you into a parasympathetic state, which is where the nervous system is more relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
There's other type of breath work where you need more energy. Like you got to get yourself going. Some people are doing Wim Hof now, where it's a very aggressive type of breathing. There's breath of fire that comes from yoga. Sometimes you need a lift, sometimes you need energy, but the breath is such a powerful way to shift your state of being. And that's really where it starts. Like even to change your thinking, you have to start with shifting how you show up, and moving your body in that way can really help.
Yeah.
One more technique I want to share, something called tapping that I use with my clients. And there are acupressure points, and we didn't do this in the session that you saw because there was a time element, but there are acupressure points on the face and also in the body. And what happens is when you tap these points, I'm going to show you one. This is called the karate chop point right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is the anxiety point on the top of the head.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start tapping this point, and there's a whole kind of system behind it, but to simplify it, if you just started tapping on the anxiety point and you said something like, I'm working on feeling more relaxed and calm right now, and you do that for a minute or two, you can significantly decrease the stress and the anxiety that you're feeling. So something as simple as making a statement about what you want to create and tapping on a point on your head or a point on your eye or underneath the nose, that can calm the system down. Some studies show that cortisol can decrease by up to 42% in just a few minutes. So it's really interesting that we have these little techniques that can make a huge difference. And a lot of us don't know these techniques. So then we go through each day like getting more and more stressed. The last thing I want to mention is walking outside for 10 to 15 minutes can decrease your anxiety by up to 25%. Yeah. So if you're a shop owner and you're struggling and you just go walk outside, if you could find a park or some grass, some nature, the problem is that our human society, we're inside fluorescent lights and we're not getting into nature and we're living out of a natural environment. So if we can recalibrate back to our bodies and also get into nature, we can significantly decrease the burnout and the stress and start to see the world in a different way.
Yeah. And it's all just natural stuff that's been given to us that can do all of that. I'm thinking of even like you mentioned earlier, and a big part of what you do is help increase performance. And what are shop owners wanting? One of the things that they're wanting is for their team to be productive, right? And to perform and to do the job. But we're all humans. And when you work with other humans and you work with a vehicle that's not working with you or the tools, and I know Brian threw a toolbox, like big toolbox across the shop one day. He just like had that moment. He's talked about it before, and adrenaline takes over and you're stronger than you were before, moments before. But a lot of things happen in the shops, and so these are things that not only help the shop owner but gives them the tools to help their teams as well. Do you like speak to I know you're speaking, I know you're doing the coaching, but do you go into organizations and do these? So you train?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. We go in and we create, a language around helping them get into the zone and then really installing micro practices, habits that create more gratitude, more peace, more well-being, that all of it can be done sometimes in as little as 5 minutes a day. And we start to embed that into cultures, because this is where you get the shift. Because when people have these, it's not like when this happens, I'll be happy. That's the trap. You actually have to cultivate happiness, well-being in this zone and this recovery. You have to cultivate it before you're actually having maybe the success you want, so that you can handle the hard times. And so we absolutely do that. And I wanted to comment about what you said with Brian about throwing the toolbox and then the anger. So a couple things I want to just point out is expressing our emotion is okay. Like, I'm not on this podcast today to say, okay, we just have to zen out and be calm all the time. Novak Djokovic is the greatest player of all time. At the time of this podcast, he won the gold medal in the Olympics, but you'll see him sometimes lose his you-know-what on the court. But within 30 seconds, he's regulating his breath again. He knows that even he's human, like you said, when we have reactions, the key is, can we shorten the time that we're in that reaction? So get that emotion out. I'm angry. Use that angry, and then get to your breath, because you don't want that to last for another day or 2 days or hours or weeks. You want to let it out, and then you want to get into your body and start to regulate. One of my friends, I haven't taken him up on this strategy yet, but the more I talk about it, it reminds me I've got to get to a Walmart or get to a Target. He's got a wiffle ball bat, or, wiffle bat. And when he wants to get his anger out, he nails his pillows or his bed. Okay, yeah. And so I know it sounds crazy, but there's some rage rooms that are popping up all over. go to a rage room, get yourself a wiffle bat, and start nailing your bed or your pillow.
Get after it.
Hopefully people won't think, your family doesn't think you've lost it when you do that. But like, what a cool way to like move your body, get the
Yep.
anger out. And maybe that's to substitute throwing the toolbox across the shop.
Which, by the way, let me say this because he's going to listen and be like, "You just called me out to the whole world."
I know.
Um, well, he's talked about it before. It's kind of a funny talking point sometimes. He's done that one time. Brian does not have anger issues, so just making that super clear. I don't even remember what prompted it or what brought it on, but he surprised himself because he literally put like these toolboxes are gigantic. But anyways, I'm glad that you said that. I feel like I could keep talking forever because I still have other questions, and but it's funny that you actually answered one that I had already, which was what are just some practical things people can include. And you said those micro habits, those daily sort of things. So I really appreciate that you were thinking about what I was going to be asking anyway. Do you have anything else like that you're like, I really want to make sure people hear this before we wrap it up? Because we can't just keep talking all night.
Sure. So there's a couple of things I want to share. One is this idea that we can learn a lot from pro sports. It's one of the reasons that, when I go in and work with companies and work with people, there's kind of instant street cred because I did live this really extraordinary, interesting life as a professional tennis player, really unique. And so many of the principles, so many of the things that you have to learn to be successful come from sport. And I think sometimes, when you're a business owner, you don't think, well, I don't use my body the same way that pro athletes do. And uh, I would argue that maybe you don't run for 5 hours like a pro tennis player in a 5 set match, but you're expending so much energy every day running your business, the mental energy, the emotional energy, and even some physical energy that I don't think it really connects. The connection isn't always made that if I take care of my body, I'll have more energy. If I focus on my sleep and my rest and recovery, if I'm not sleeping well, instead of, I hear it all the time with sleep is like, I just don't sleep well. I'm just getting old. So I wake up in the middle of the night to pee. Well, if your body is relaxed, if your mind is relaxed, you actually should sleep through the night.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I want people to start getting curious about is if something's not right in their life and the way they want it, not to just accept it as truth, but to start to investigate, well, gosh, how could I sleep more?
Mm-hmm.
And what if I started meditating or breathing before bed? What if I got off electronics before bed? What if I started cleaning up my diet? What if I cut alcohol? Like the what ifs, get curious about your habits and
Right.
start to investigate because it will make a huge difference short term and long term when you start to look at your habits. We are living, I joke, we're living in a matrix because by the time we're 35 years old, 95% of our thoughts, habits, perceptions of the world are locked in. And it's only getting more intense with the algorithm on social media because it
Yeah.
just feeds us everything we believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, really working on this idea that we can change our thoughts, we can change our habits, we can change our state. We're not too old to change.
Mm-hmm.
That's one big thing I want to share. The second thing I want to share is I mentioned my brother earlier. And when I've been on podcasts in the past, a lot of times that he's been a big focal point because he struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. And one of the reasons I'm a speaker is because of my brother. He had a really tough life. He went to prison, made some poor choices. He rehabilitated and transformed in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got out, he was doing big things in the world. He won a speaking contest, got his own TED Talk. And I was coaching and mentoring my brother behind the scenes. And it was one of the greatest gifts I was ever given was to spend that time with him and to see his passion and to see, here's a guy who gets out of prison and had nothing.
Yeah.
And literally built himself up to the point in a year and a half where he was on a TEDx stage.
Yeah.
I mean, this ascent was incredible. So when people tell me they're struggling, I'm like, imagine being in prison and you have to come out of prison with nothing and you just start from scratch. So, we can all do it. Now, the story doesn't end well with my brother in that he started using drugs again, and we lost him a year and a half ago. And I share that story because part of my mission is that I thought that my brother and I were going to be on stages together. When you saw me in that breakout room
Mm-hmm.
in Denver, I thought at some point the two of us were going to be on a stage teaching these principles, inspiring people. And I don't get to do that.
Yeah.
But he is with me in spirit. And every time I get on the stage, I get to share a part of me and a part of him. And I know that he would be really proud of like what we're doing. And so I share that because a lot of people are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are struggling with mental health issues. They're struggling with drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
It's hard out there right now. And so if I can be a little beacon of hope, a little beacon of light, that there are tools, there are strategies, there are people, there are coaches, there are mentors that have their heads on straight, that have a real authentic care for people, which is the place I like to play. That's important to me for people to know my story beyond just I was some hotshot pro tennis player and now I'm going to tell everyone how the pro tennis player did it. No,
Mm-hmm.
it's more about like, listen, I have my struggles too. And my brother really struggled, and I can empathize with people that are struggling and I want to help. And so I always give my number out, I give my email out, and I'm like, if you know someone who's struggling and they need a resource or need a connection, I'm there for that. Because if I can help one person every time I get on a stage, then I feel like I'm in line and aligned with my calling.
I totally get that. And I too have my own family stories relating exactly the same. If I had known you wanted to go there, I should have known because I mean, I feel like we're kind of friends now, but and I follow you. We would have spent more time there because that is for sure. Um, I love when you said it's hard out there, and it's very true. It is very hard out there. I just did a little post yesterday from a story that someone shared on stage at church yesterday, giving a testimonial from youth camp. And the very smallest part that I'll share here for time's sake is he said he wrote a text to send to it was to his pastor to basically be vulnerable and say, I'm in a rough place right now. But it was late and he saw that it said do not disturb, and he went to erase it, and he just kind of felt, like you were saying, everybody has their own thing. He felt the Lord say, hit send, just hit send. And he didn't want to because it was on do not disturb and he didn't want to bother, but he hit send. And he said the moment he hit send, he had a peace that came over him because he knew, now I'm not alone. Someone else is on the other side of that and received that message. So there's a whole lot more to all of that. So I'm very grateful that you shared that story. It's super, super important. And we're going to be putting all of Jeff's contact information in the in the show notes. But Jeff, tell them how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. My website's jeffsalzenstein.com. My email is jeff@jeffsalzenstein.com. My phone number is 303-882-9028. That is not a marketing number. That is my personal cell phone. I'll trust that whoever's listening is not going to blow it up, but I do want to hear from people if they need help, if they have questions, if they need guidance. I had someone reach out to me. I did a men's group a couple months ago. I was a guest on it, and it was more than a couple months ago now. I was going through a rough patch I had a relationship that shifted over a year ago. And so I needed some support. I went to this men's group and I had this guy reach out to me a week ago. He's like, hey, I've been having trouble with my shoulder. I don't know what to do with it. Like, this guy just reached out to me. And ironically, he's in Shreveport, Louisiana right now.
Oh.
And because I know what to look for, I went on Google, I typed in a certain technique. It's kind of like what you and I have talked about with some health stuff. And I found a rehab place, and I said, listen, just call these people and ask them if they do this technique and show up. Like, what do you have to lose? Now, he may not do it,
Right.
but I feel like I'm kind of like called to, because I've seen so much out there, I feel called and I know where to look and how to help people in that area. So yeah, I just give my number out, and if someone's listening and says, man, we want to have him come speak at our conference, we want him to come to our association, we want him to come speak to our team, obviously you can get in touch with me. And I'm here to serve. I'm here to get on stages. I'm here to get into the rooms and have to teach, to share a lot of the things that we talked about today and more, of course, but also bring a humanness and a realness. This is not, for me, this is not about performance. This is not about getting on a stage and being the sage on the stage. It's about a real person who went through some real stuff in the sports world, who now wants to bring it to the world, bring my message to the world. And so, yeah, I would love to help anyone that resonates with this message.
Well, I'm going to be sending this to some of my, very specifically, some people in the industry who could have you come speak over there. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it so much. I feel like we could do a whole nother round of this, but
Maybe next year you'll bring me back.
that's exactly right. We don't have to wait a whole year.
Okay, great. Bring me back sooner.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the Auto Repair Marketing Podcast on the Aftermarket Radio Network. There are some other great shows on this network and a brand new one specifically about communication. Definitely go check them out. You can find all of them at the aftermarketradionetwork.com or on your favorite podcast listening apps like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many others. Tune in for another episode next week. Until then, go fill those bays.